Hello and welcome back to Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at d1baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy, joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Mark Etheridge. We are here to recap, mercifully, the final non-conference weekend of the season in the SEC. It all starts next week. The 10-week gauntlet that is conference play will begin, and we will move on from this weekend, which was, I don't think I'm being overly critical to say it was just kind of, just was. There was some stuff.
Baseball.
That's right. It was some interesting stuff we'll get into, but just very different than last week where Mark and I went at, I don't know, like an hour and 15 minutes recapping the weekend. This one, we're going to effort to make this one quite a bit shorter because frankly, while there were some interesting results, a lot of it is stuff we've already kind of covered that we won't have answers to until teams get into conference play. So
yeah.
We'll do what we can. But before we get into any of that here shortly, to let you know, this episode of Highway to Hoover and every episode of Highway to Hoover is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Get ready for a new season of fishing fun with Academy Sports and Outdoors and reel in the best gear at low prices every day. Plus, Academy offers easy ways to shop and save time, like free 1-hour in-store or curbside pickup on academy.com orders. Mark, before we get to the actual recap, we were just kind of in one of our other internal chats here at D1 Baseball. You had done just some quick back of the napkin number crunching on non-conference performance. And if you don't mind, rattle off the stat you put in the chat about run rule wins or 10 run wins versus losses, because I think people look at, and you see this on social media here and there of people kind of gawking at like, oh my gosh, A&M lost to New Mexico State and Bama lost to Presbyterian, et cetera, et cetera. But the reality of it obviously is quite different. So what do you got on those numbers? Read them back to me.
Yeah. So the SEC, they went 13-3 Sunday. So they are now 202-35 overall, which is an .852 winning percentage in non-conference games. Okay. So of those 202 wins, 70 of them have been by 10 runs or more. So if you think about that, the loss column was 35. So this conference has won twice as many games by 10 runs or more than they've lost, which is kind of hard to grapple with. Certainly a lot of that is just strength of schedule. You have teams at the very top of the sport playing teams at the middle to the bottom, and you get predictable results. But then it's also baseball, and we see these weird results, and you look around the country and even within the league, and you see some upsets. I mean, Omaha beats LSU, Presbyterian beats Alabama, Holy Cross beats Auburn. All of these different results that certainly you would not project to happen, and they do, but they aren't happening as frequently as maybe they have in the past, and certainly aren't happening as often as they do for other leagues. So it's, on one hand, I love to see more challenging non-conference schedules, because honestly, I don't know how good any of these teams are. I think they're really good, but other than, I think everybody's had kind of one hard weekend, and after that, it's okay. Well, can you do it week after week? And I don't think we know that about anybody. I mean, Vandy's played a challenging schedule, but other than that, I think kind of most of the teams are in the same boat here. So we're going to find out, how good they stack up when they're pressed. How do they respond? What happens when those starters who've just been mowing people down and striking out double digits and all that, when they get pressed a little bit, and you have to go, either their pitch counts are up and you have to go to the pen early, or you just run into that one hitter that you just can't handle, where in the past he didn't play in that game. Is he? He's not playing at that kind of competition. So I do think that's kind of fun with numbers, though. I mean, and the symmetry of it, 70-35, also, kind of spoke to me a little bit.
Yeah, it's also, I don't. This is not me trying to rub salt in the wound, but 8 of those losses are Missouri. So you take those out, it's 25 losses. Is my math right there? No, 27 losses.
27, yeah.
Yeah, 27 losses. So there's 16 teams, so 27 divided
Mhm.
by 16, it's fewer than 2 for on average. So yeah. Anyway, but that brings us. I think it's a good segue to this week's slate that we'll talk about, because some team, probably multiple teams, that are feeling pretty good about their team right now, and their fans are chirping about we should be ranked higher, or if you're not ranked, we should be ranked. Is going to finish 14th. And and maybe 14th, I doubt it, but maybe 14th is good enough to make a regional. I don't know. We don't know how the committee's going to handle this.
Hello to basketball.
Right. I mean, basketball is going to be like a little bit of a test case, although we just we can't guarantee it's going to, be the same.
I'll say 4 more teams.
Philosophy. Right. So regardless, but to me, that's a good segue into these discussions, because there were a handful of teams that got pushed and had rubber games, or lost on Sunday to make it to where they didn't sweep series. So let's start with let's just start with the teams that had rubber games and could have ostensibly lost. I thought what Kentucky did this weekend was impressive against Wofford. Wofford, for me, of the teams that SEC teams were playing, if you made me bet on which of these teams is the best come May, I'd bet Wofford. Just based on history, regional team last year, they always win like 35 games.
Yeah.
So that'd probably be my bet, but I don't know. But again, I came away impressed with Kentucky because they won games different ways. They blew them out on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
They took a loss on Saturday, and I said this on Weekend Waypoints. It looked like a blowout loss. It wasn't really. Wofford scored 8 runs in the 9th.
Yes, yeah.
So
in Kentucky,
that's not.
I think they had 4 errors and had 8 walks. I mean, it was just not a characteristic Kentucky.
Stuff that's just probably not going to happen again. Now, I don't think they're as sharp defensively. Actually, I know they're not as sharp defensively as they were last year, because how could they be? So that may happen more often, but it does feel like an outlier. And then today they come back and win 2-1, which, you can nitpick and say,
Sunday.
Sunday, you could nitpick and say, okay, I wish they would have scored more than 2 runs. Fine. I get it. But they piggybacked Walker and Rouse. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing moving forward. If you assume that Nick McKay and Ben Cleaver are pretty good. And so far, I think we can assume that's the case. And then you have Walker and Rouse, 2 guys that, frankly, if you rewind to the end of the fall, I think we assumed both of those guys were going to be in the rotation. At least that's the word we were hearing. And so the fact that you can piggyback them, I think is kind of nice. So, that's they lost a game in that series, but ultimately I came away feeling pretty good about the way Kentucky played against a team that I think is pretty good ultimately.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's going to have those games where things just don't go your way. You kick the ball around, a good fielder commits a fielding error. You have a guy who's been throwing strikes. He just doesn't have it that day. And if those happen the same day, that's how you lose. And that's what happened with Kentucky on Saturday, at least a big part of it. And it was good to see them rebound, because Kentucky's the kind of team, I feel like they're going to play a lot of rubber games this year. They're going to play a lot of close games. They're going to be a lot of series that could go either way, because I think they're good enough to play with anybody, but I don't think they're just so overwhelming talent-wise that they're just going to blow people out either. I think they're going to be in all these close games. So if you're a Kentucky fan, that's going to be, depending on your outlook, it's either going to be amazing or it's going to be awful, because you're going to be so tense the whole weekend. But you're going to have a lot of close games to watch. So I feel like, this was good, especially for Kentucky to come out and pitch the way that they did. Hold a team to 1 run. It's on the 3rd day of the weekend when most teams are out of pitching, and you win 2-1. I think that's against a team obviously that's aggressive like Wofford, who will put pressure on you to make mistakes and score on you. And Kentucky was able to do it. So yeah, I'm with you there. That was a good one. I think the other one, Auburn Old Dominion, that was one that Auburn led 9-2 on Saturday, or 8-2, something like that, and lost. Just and really gave it all up in a couple of innings. And it's just with Auburn, for me, so many new players and new roles, and I know that's kind of the world we're in, but they're depending on younger players. And I just feel like you're going to have some of this. You're going to have that roller coaster. You're going to come out and you're going to look amazing that one week, and then you're going to lose to somebody you shouldn't. And that's I think that's where Auburn is. But that should lessen as the year goes on, as these guys get more seasoned, as they're able to learn from some of these early hiccups. The other thing that's just a little bit, I guess, worrisome is Ike Irish, left Saturday's game. He got hit by a pitch and did not play Sunday. In fact, in Saturday's game, his spot in the lineup came up in a crucial situation, after he'd already left, as it always does, right? And he wasn't there to get that AB. So I do feel like, he's a guy who really hasn't hit the way you'd like him to, at least so far this year. I think it's like 270, 280 average, something like that. And he's so much better hitter than that. So getting him back healthy and getting him going, I think that's a real key for Auburn is they try to take that next step.
Yeah, to me, the key stat for Auburn so far is a 4.06 team ERA, which, look, in SEC play, that's great. But for right now, it is 14th of 16. Only Georgia's and Missouri's are higher, and that's probably just not going to cut it. I like the offense has been, just for my preconceived notion, the offense has been better than I expected, but not so much better that it could probably overcome a team ERA 14th out of 16 in the league. Obviously, I think there's some intrigue about what does Cade Fisher give them. It again
He's
was
not going deep. Yeah.
No, it was another short outing. And so it's like, is this just what it is? Maybe that's true. Maybe this just is what it is. It's an opener situation, or they know they're going to have to use multiple guys that day. Or do we start to look at other options, right? Is it a rotation of, Dutton, Chatterton, and Alvarez, or do you try to convert Tilly or Carlson, or, do you look at that? Because those guys have pitched pretty well. So they have options, which is something that last year just didn't feel like they did. Last year, it felt like they had to kind of stick with some guys they might have otherwise moved on from, but they're going to have to do it because, again, 14th out of 16 is not going to cut it from a team ERA standpoint.
Yeah, agree. The other thing I would add on Auburn is they're down 2 arms. Mason Cook, Connor Gatwood haven't pitched at all this year.
Yep.
They should get them at some point this year, and they could both just be that shot in the arm. I don't know if they're going to start, but they would certainly help. And as you saw Saturday, Auburn could use some help. They could use a couple more guys in the pen.
Yeah, Cook in particular, just because he's proven, was really good at Creighton, and a guy that if you decided you wanted to move one of those guys from the bullpen of the rotation, having Cook back would make you feel a little bit better about doing that. Okay, so then we had a couple that lost games on Sunday. I'll start with, I think we can probably be pretty quick about A&M, Mark, and that's just because I think anybody that tells you they understand exactly what's happening with A&M kind of sleepwalking through some games is lying, or just thinks they understand it and doesn't. Because I don't know if there's any great explanation other than the fact that this is just a different team that's having to deal with different challenges, and it's just not going as smooth as they thought. And that stuff can snowball, but to me, it's just kind of, I don't have any good explanations. I've been asked a ton. I'm sure you have too. And I don't have any real good explanations for it, but they lose 4-1 on Sunday after really handling New Mexico State first 2 games, lose 4-1. And I think they had 4 hits. Mark, is that right? Yeah.
4.
So I don't know if you have anything more enlightening on that, but I really don't. I just think until we find out otherwise, I think this team is just capable of a game like that.
It certainly looks like Michael Early is like the rest of us right now. He doesn't know which team he's going to get from day to day. And that was, they struggled heading into the series. And then the first day, the Friday game, they were amazing. They looked like the best team in college baseball. And then Saturday, they were fine. They won. And then Sunday, it was just abysmal offensively. They still pitched fine. So that's going to be a really interesting thing to watch as they go into conference play, because are they able to flip the switch once that opponent across the diamond is, quote, equal to them? because talent is not the issue. It's execution. And that's where, a lot of times you see that where, okay, well, these guys are thumbing it in there at 84 and I can't hit it. But once it's, 96, it's a whole different story. And we'll see, right? Because, I mean, even in practice, they probably don't see a lot of 84s. So I just, yeah, who knows, right? And that's the thing that we got to figure out with them, because they've got an Alabama team coming in who can really hit it. Alabama's got some issues on the mound, I think, but with that kind of matchup heading, to open up SEC play, it's really fascinating because A&M's at home. You have all these expectations, and here's this Alabama team coming in who just lost its first game, who's kind of feeling pretty bullish about themselves. So you got this team that was expected to be at the top is kind of feeling down, and this team that was kind of in the middle was expecting to be high, and then they're going to meet. And what do we see? And I feel like as A&M, if they can just I don't know, don't bury themselves early, the talent should take over at some point, and they'll figure it out. But like we saw with with LSU and with Auburn last year, you can just bury yourselves in this league and have to play just amazing to get out. And LSU did, Auburn didn't. And that's where, if you're A&M, you definitely don't want to be in that situation where every weekend from mid-April on is must win. And at this point, yeah, that's kind of the team I'm looking at.
Yeah, the I think the dynamic that we understand with him is they pitched well enough. The offense has just gone silent at times, and that is absolutely 100% true. They're also last in fielding percentage in the league right now.
It's terrible. Yeah,
961. And last year's team was a good defensive team. It's not like they were like they had the SEC version of Cam Canarella in center field, and like he's just like. They didn't have Justin LeBron at shortstop or Merrick Houston at shortstop in terms of just like, that type of defender, but they were good.
Right. Yeah.
But 961 again, like that's really not helping your pitchers. And the pitchers probably already feel like on certain days they have thin margins. So certainly something they're going to need to clean up. Bama Presbyterian, it feels pretty similar to me. You mentioned the offense for Alabama. Yeah. I agree with you. I saw that in Jacksonville firsthand. The pitching staff for me, though, it feels a little bit similar. It's similar but different from Auburn. The way in which it's similar is just like still feels like they're figuring things out. But for me, it's a classic case of you look at the roster and it's like there's a whole lot of options here, but how many do they really trust right now? Like it's like Osmer and Tyler Fay has been pretty good. Maybe a couple of others on any given day, but the list is pretty short right now. And it's exacerbated by the fact that the reality is Riley Quick is still working his way back. He's not full go to go out there and throw 100 pitches. Zane Adams was great this past weekend against Presbyterian, but the first 3 starts were just kind of okay. Bobby Alcock's not really getting deep in games. So they're relying on a lot of bullpen right now. And so far it's been a little bit of a mixed bag.
Yeah. It's funny. I watched some of their game today, and the bullpen guys who had been their best pitchers were some of those were the guys that struggled today. Like Fay he had an 0-2, hung a slider on an 0-2 pitch and gave up a bases loaded double. Matthew Heiberger, who's been really good. He was so good against I guess it was Troy the other night. He didn't really have his stuff today. Those are pitchers who up until Sunday had been really good for them and just didn't perform. And, like we talked about, sometimes it's just not your day. I mean, Justin LeBron had a big error that led to a couple of runs. Maybe you start DHing him. He's just not a very good defensive shortstop, guys. You just need to,
it's time to
call it. Before I get
aggregated,
that was sarcasm.
That's part of why I started laughing in the middle of it, just to make clear that it was a joke. Yeah.
But anyway,
it's time to call it. Pack it in.
Yeah, but I feel like they can certainly swing it. They've still got some things to figure out on the mound, and maybe maybe everyone does at this point. You either have too many guys and you're not sure how to fit them in, or you don't have enough guys and you're trying to push some guys up into those spots. And I think Alabama, they might actually have a few too many, where they're trying to find out which ones that they trust and which ones should be put into which roles. Because I think they've thrown 21 pitchers this year, something like that. It's hard to keep that many sharp, and it looks like they're starting to consolidate that, and you just wonder, there's got to be some learning curve and trial and error in that process.
The final team that lost games this weekend and is Mizzou, and it's just tough, man. Like, we were like, okay, let's look at non-conference play and see if we can find evidence of steps forward. And we could talk about some of that here in a second, but like in terms of results, it's been a step backward. I don't think there's any other way to, there's not been a single weekend where they've just totally controlled the proceedings. And that's a problem. Now, I told myself going into this, I'm like, all right, I'm going to look at the stat sheet and we're going to find some reasons for some optimism. And I did kind of find some of it. If you really wanted to squint and be optimistic that, hey, maybe it's not as bad as the 8-8 record shows, I think you could look at the fact they are hitting 300 as a team. Now, everyone in the SEC is hitting 300 as a team. I get it. But this was a team last year that was really bad offensively. So we are grading on a curve here. Caden Nicoletto's a D2 transfer from Columbia College, which is like 5 minutes from Mizzou's campus. So he didn't even have to move. That's nice and convenient for him. Yeah. Dude can really hit. Like, he's kind of shorter, and it's not like he's not like an Adonis type body, not right. Fast. He's not like, but the dude can just hit. And so he's hitting 422. You like that. So I say all that to say, I do think there's a chance this offense is actually better, and the pitching has actually kind of let them down a little bit so far. And so if you believe that you give Tim Jamison enough time, they can get things, figured out a little bit on the mound. If you believe that, I think there's your reason for optimism. It's like, okay, maybe if the pitching is 33% better come April and the offense, these strides they've made continue into SEC play, I think maybe there's something there. I don't know that it amounts to any sort of big move in the standings, but it certainly would help ward off just a catastrophic season, which I think if you ask the average SEC baseball fan out there, that's probably what they think is going to happen with Mizzou, and maybe it will. But if they want to avoid that, I do think there's reason for at least a little bit of optimism based on how they've looked so far.
Yeah. I mean, they've been a hard watch. I mean, I've tried to tune in a few times, and it's different. Okay. So the other 15 teams are different than Missouri right now. And that doesn't mean, as we've seen all preseason, Missouri's not going to win some games. They are. But it's just not the same right now. And then that's what, Carrick's trying to address it through recruiting, and he's going through the high school ranks. So that, there's some timing involved in that. The players he's bringing in, they've had some impact, but maybe not like some of these other highly regarded transfers that we're seeing at other places. It's just the roster is not at a place where it's going to be competitive week in, week out. So they've got to pick their spots, and they've got to play well at home. Missouri over the last few years has had some success early in the year, especially before the weather warms up. And I think that's what you're looking to now, right? You got to go to LSU opening weekend. Good freaking luck, man. I mean, they can really pitch it, and Jarrett Jones is got it figured out. Derek Curiel, I mean, they've got a lot of reasons to fear them going in. But I think if you're Missouri, you got nothing to lose, right? Just nobody expects anything out of you. Let it all hang out, and let's see what happens. And if you can finally have some success, I mean, no one's expecting anything of you. People like Joe and Mark are thinking you're gonna finish last. So, and go out there and prove us wrong, man. I think that's the thing. You really have only up to go at this point, and that's if you're Missouri, you got to embrace that chip, man. You got to take it and run with it.
Yeah, I mean, trust us when we say that it'd be a heck of a lot more fun if Mizzou went out
Yeah,
there and played well and won some games, like, because
yeah,
that adds some spice.
no
As
doubt.
confounding as it was when they swept Florida last year, it was like, well, this is interesting, you know.
Hmm.
I think there's also, quickly, one more thing I'll say is I think there's also some pretty clear situations here of guys trying to do too much. Jackson Lovich, who we know is a good hitter,
Yeah.
he's hitting 328, but he struck out 17 times and has yet to draw a walk.
Mm,
And that to me suggests he's doing a lot of swinging.
yeah.
Jedier Hernandez, who is not necessarily a big time offensive player, but he's batting 148 for a guy that they want to be an everyday guy. That probably suggests to me someone pressing a little bit. Who knows?
Mhm.
But anyway, so perhaps little turnarounds there coming for those guys. All right.
Could be.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I was just going. Yeah,
Oh,
could be a. Yep.
all right. As we've done the last few weeks, as we wrap up here, I'm going to roll through some of the sweeps, which is
Mhm.
not to say there's nothing interesting with some of these. So we will talk about some things here and there. So I'm going to lay out the menu of the sweeps, and then I'm going to let Mark choose from that buffet on what he'd like to expound on a little bit more. So we had Georgia over Columbia. I'll just say quickly, for as much talent as they have on the mound, it feels like Georgia hasn't really figured out the combinations yet. That's kind of my headline there. Ole
Especially
Miss over
early.
Jackson. Yeah. Yeah. Ole Miss over Jacksonville State. That Friday game at least got like weirdly chippy. So that was what passed for interesting this weekend, is like a moderately chippy game against Jacksonville State. Tennessee versus St. Bonaventure.
Mhm.
The sweep there. I actually thought, considering how badly Tennessee beats a lot of these non-conference, I thought the Bonnies actually acquitted
Yeah.
themselves, other than they got no hit, which is a weird thing to say. They acquitted themselves well, but Tennessee didn't have any days where they scored 27 runs, right? Which is a thing we've seen them do.
Mhm.
Arkansas over Portland, blowout, and then a couple of relatively close games there. Oklahoma over Sam Houston State. Sam Houston fought pretty good in games 1 and 3 of that series, more so than I thought they would, frankly. South Carolina over Morehead State. That was a sweep capped by a
Mhm.
1-0 win.
Yeah.
One day after Carolina won 16-11 against Morehead State. Figure that out. Texas over Santa Clara. That one was pretty straightforward. Texas pitched it
Yeah.
well. Santa Clara just didn't really have much offensively. Vanderbilt over Xavier. Thought that was pretty impressive. Xavier's
Mhm.
talented and veteran. LSU over North Alabama. North Alabama competed in, I think one of those games was 6-2 maybe Saturday. So that was
Yeah.
kind of as it got. Mississippi State over Queens. That is Queens of North Carolina, by the way. That is not Queens, New York, just
Yeah.
for those wondering. And Florida over Harvard. Obviously, some of the injury stuff for Florida is actually what feels most pressing. We talked about on
Mhm.
weekend waypoints, but Kyle Jones out for the year. Pierce Capola got skipped. Aiden King was excellent in his place, though, so you feel like
Mhm.
maybe that's actually going to be okay in the long run. But Florida got the sweep over Harvard. Of those,
Yeah.
Mark, what stands out to you?
Well, with Florida, I mean, Jake Clemente didn't go today either, or in
Yeah,
game 3 either. So
yeah.
they were without 2/3 of their rotation and had to kind of muddle through. They did more than muddle through with King on the mound, but you do that is worrisome as they go and they play the 2 remaining undefeated teams next week to be down 2 of your 3 starters. They got Florida State on Tuesday and Tennessee next weekend, and all 4 games are on the road. Um,
And in
so
addition to being without Kyle Jones, still don't have Cade Kurland.
yeah, true,
So like
true.
beat
Mhm.
up on the position player side too. Continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So Georgia was interesting to me. Just, I mean, Rylan Zabransky, he had what 5 home runs in 3 games. I mean, who does that?
Yeah.
I think it's, I think he's gotten up to 9 on the year. Of course, you hit 5 in a weekend, you can put up some good totals. And Robbie Burnett continues to have a big year. I think he's up to 8 home runs, and he's probably got double digit hit by pitches. I mean, he's been everything they wanted and they brought in. The questions are on the mound. They keep having these big innings against them, usually early in the game, and they're having to fight and claw. And fortunately, they've been able to do that. but as we wondered, I mean, how sustainable is that if you keep giving up 5 and 6 run innings against, or 9 run inning as they did in one game against better competition? Are you able to claw out of that? So that to me is they're a fascinating team to watch, because they're never out of a game, and no lead is ever safe. I think Vanderbilt sweeping Xavier, that was a series. If you were going to go into the weekend thinking an SEC team is going to drop one, that would have probably been one I would have picked. I feel like Xavier's got enough talent and experience that they would have been able to take one, and Vandy said no thank you. We're going to take all 3. I think the other one would be Arkansas just being able to continue to put up some offensive numbers. Obviously the Aloy brothers keep doing their thing, but it's not all them. They're able to kind of quiet some of the criticism that was so evident a few weeks ago on the offense, and they don't have to beat you 2-1. I think at this point they're going to score some runs, and it's not a quote pitching heavy kind of club. After that, I mean, Tennessee is just so impressive. They just keep throwing arms at you, and it seems like one's just as talented as the one he's replacing. And then offensively, I mean, how many guys do they have that are starter quality that they could plug in that lineup? I mean, it is 12, 13, 14. I mean, it's a lot of different guys, and they're able to find roles for them and keep everybody engaged. That's a team that looks like it's in midseason form, and we're 3-4 weeks into this. So super impressed by them, and looking forward to seeing what will be an incredible showdown. Liam Doyle against Liam Peterson next Friday night in Knoxville. That should be a lot of fun.
A lot of strikeouts.
Yeah, you would think. Yeah. Then we're going to go up there, and they're both going to get knocked out in the 3rd inning, right? That's the way it's going to happen.
Yeah. One last thing before we get out of here, because I think that covered it pretty well. I'll hand the mic over to Mark here, but he's about to embark on a pretty impressive trip. He's gonna get in the car and take off down our great American interstate highway system, and is going to see a whole bunch of games in not a very long period of time. So set the table for us a little bit, Mark, on the trip itself and what you're going to be doing and what people should be looking out for.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm going to start next Friday, and during that trip, I'm going to see 10 games in 10 venues in 10 days. Okay, so it's going to be unique. I'm going to kind of be blogging. I'm going to kind of be doing some video. I'm going to be writing, obviously, like normal. Continue to do the daily dish stuff. But it's going to be really cool, because I'm going to see 13 of the 16 SEC teams within this trip, and I'll see one of the 3 I'm not on Tuesday, because Ole Miss comes down here to Mobile, and I'll see them against South Alabama, who incidentally won a series at Louisiana Tech. So that could be a little spicy as well. So yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm going to start in Knoxville, and for that Liam duel that we just talked about, and then be in Athens, and I'll be in Columbia that first weekend, and then head through and do some midweek stuff. I'm going to do a game at Rickwood Field, which is the oldest ballpark in the U.S. that's active, and I'll also head to Tuscaloosa, see Alabama play. I'll go to Nashville. I'm going to see Lipscomb and Memphis on Wednesday. There wasn't a whole lot of things that worked logistically, but and then stay in Nashville for Thursday when Texas A&M takes on Vandy, which should be a fun one. Great pitching matchup there as well. Then go to Texas for their first SEC home game as they take on LSU. So that should be an incredible atmosphere there. And then head to Norman and see Oklahoma in their first home weekend as they take on Mississippi State, and then conclude the weekend in Fayetteville against as Arkansas hosts South Carolina. So should be a really cool time to get a taste of a lot of different ballparks, a lot of different atmospheres, fan bases, and also see teams. It's just one game, but see a lot of teams within a short amount of time where you can sort of evaluate talent levels and things of that nature. So hopefully rain will cooperate and there won't be a whole lot of rescheduling and trying to make some hard decisions. But anyway, I'm really jazzed about this. Never done anything like this, so it will be. Pray for me. It's going to be a lot of time on the road, and my track record with flipping trucks on the road. So let's keep it safe and stay upright as we head to all these different venues.
Yeah, please don't T-bone Mark on the road if you're out driving across the Southeast over the next 10 days or starting this Friday. So yeah, please do not do that. That would not be great for us. Well, Mark, I'm looking forward to living vicariously through it a little bit. I'm most jealous of the Rickwood game. That's a place I'd love to, and hopefully I'll eventually get that opportunity, but I'm definitely going to be jealous of you getting a chance to see a game in that venue where there's been so much history. It's kind of, America doesn't have a lot of places. Like anybody who's ever been to Europe can tell you that, like, compared to America, like everything in Europe is ancient.
Right.
But that's kind of like America's sporting version of that, is a place like Rickwood Field, where there's just been a lot of history and, being able to kind of be in the same place as so many legends is a cool deal. So I'm excited for you to get to experience that and excited to follow it along, as I'm sure our listeners and readers are as well. All right, that is an episode. That is going to do it for this edition of the Highway to Hoover podcast, a production of SEC Extra over at d1baseball.com. I want to thank Academy Sports and Outdoors for sponsoring this and every episode of Highway to Hoover. I want to thank Tecovas Boots for sponsoring it as well. And while we're at it, let me give you a little Tecovas information. Whether it's the leather in your glove or your tailgating chairs, baseball people know that quality matters. That's why we love Tecovas boots. Find your perfect pair today at Tecovas. Thank you to Mark, as always, for joining me. Thank you, the listeners, for listening.